if I can't be cured of being a vampire, then at least I can be a straight vampire from here on out.
She's looking for a beard.
Yeah, she's like, I just need a really good beard forever, like until the end of time.
Be my eternal beard.
In 2017, Universal Studios announced the birth of a new shared universe of monster movies, bringing their classic horror icons into the contemporary franchise film landscape. But after the critical and financial failure of its first installment, the project was indefinitely abandoned. Now, in 2022, the powers that be have called upon one pulp horror devotee and one snarky film critic to unearth the concept. I'm Dylan Roth.
And I'm Dalton DeShane.
Are you afraid of the dark universe?
Hello and welcome back to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe, the podcast where we attempt to resurrect Universal Studios' failed cinematic universe of monster movies, one pitch at a time. We are nearing the end of Phase 2, and coming up real fast on our Dark Legion 2, which is sort of our Age of Ultron Avengers crossover with all of the monster characters, which Dylan and I are currently writing.
That's right.
And are definitely on track and on schedule.
Not falling behind at all on that script.
Not at all. We haven't both been insanely busy this week. It's going to be great. Last episode, you heard Dylan's pitch for Dracula Lives, our first ever standalone Dracula film in the Dark Universe. But we kind of thought maybe you were all a little Dracula starved. And so we're following up on that theme today. Basically, if you haven't listened to the show before, in between our sort of canon official pitches from Dylan and I didn't introduce us, did I? I'm Dalton DeShane. I'm one of the hosts.
I'm Dylan Roth. I'm the other one of the hosts.
Yes.
There we go. That's out of the way.
Yeah. Wow. Unprofessional of me. What was I saying? Oh, in between our sort of like big pitches, we have guests on because we are interested in expanding the Dark Universe past just sort of our core films here. And we want to get some outside perspectives on what we could do with the Dark Universe. And so we've heard pitches from Merritt K for a remake of the 1934 The Black Cat. We've heard, of course, from Maddie Lipchansky and Jaya Saxena, who pitched a remake of the 1973 film about snake people. Have we had any other canon adjacent ones? Because we had Calvin doing The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, but that was a competing film.
Well, if you've listened to last week's episode or 2 weeks ago's episode, then you know that the very first guest pitch that we had by Giovanni Colantonio for a Dark Universe narrative video game is now canon.
Super canon.
Super canon. A character introduced in that has now appeared in one of our mainline films. So these are potentially consequential. We know that there are some folks out there, we look at the numbers, a normal amount, not obsessively or anything, just a normal amount of looking at the statistics of various episodes.
I look at them a little obsessively.
That we know that there are some people who seem like who generally skip the guest episodes and just listen to the mainline episodes.
No, they don't.
And listen, as flattering as that is, that you would rather hear us talk about our made-up movies than other more interesting people.
Don't say in front of our guests that people skip the guest episodes.
No, here's the thing. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. Not only because you're missing out on great pitches, but because if you're like, what your reason is, I only want to listen to the ones that count, in the canon, in the main continuity. This gets real. We're not going to pull any Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. crap on you here, okay? If we say it's canon, it's going to stay canon. And Jeff Loeb and Ike Perlmutter can't take that away from you.
However, today, we might end up with a canon conflict. Because Dylan has just pitched his take on Dracula Lives, which involved a lot of vampire lore, a lot of Dracula lore. And today we're getting sort of a competing pitch regarding the direct sequel to Dracula, 1936's Dracula's Daughter. And now, of course, in our canon, we have not introduced a daughter for Dracula. So we'll have to see if this fits into our existing canon or if this ends up being our first Dark Universe Elseworlds style parallel non-canon story.
We'll see.
So
Dark
Dylan.
Universe, Black Label. Our guest for this episode is a film critic whose work can be found on Looper or at Baltimore Beat, as well as his YouTube channel, The Armchair Auteur. Loyal listeners of our show may also recognize him as the voice of Victor Frankenstein in the Dark Legion House of Dracula. Please welcome back to the Dark Universe, Dom Griffin.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Of course. Yes, this is going to be our Black Label Dark Universe pitch, which means I assume we will see Dracula's dick in this.
The daughter has to come from somewhere, Dalton.
Yes, we will see full-on penetration from Dracula and his bride. I am assuming, Dom, that you have put that into your pitch.
If you haven't, you might want to start finding a place for it right
Yeah,
now.
time for me to find more full frontal. Yeah.
We mandated that Merritt blow up a house at the end of her pitch, and we're mandating full penetration in yours. We are kind of heads of the project.
Yeah, we're
so
film
what we say
producers.
goes.
We don't have our demands don't have to make sense, but they will be honored. Even if you have to throw them into another movie 25 years from now, we will get Nick Cage as Superman fighting a giant fucking spider. We will have it.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
So, Dom, welcome to the Dark Universe. Why don't you tell us a little bit about maybe your history with the Universal Monsters, and also why you chose to pitch us Dracula's daughter this week?
Okay, yeah. So I'm not quite the deep depth horror fan that I think you are, and most of my love for the Universal Monsters comes from being a kid and reading just books on monsters, because I loved vampires as a child.
That is enough.
Was
we
a
don't
big Anne Rice nerd. Yeah. But in terms of the Universal Monsters, I did not grow up with a huge affinity for the classic monsters. I guess when I was young, we had Stephen Sommers doing The Mummy and stuff, and I thought that was this generation's closest connection to that world, because obviously, as we know, every other attempt to really revisit it has not worked.
Yeah. Except for this one. This one's become very successful.
I think that's one of the coolest things about the pod is you're both the only people to make this work in decades of people trying, and with no money, no budget.
Thank you, Dom. All it took was having nothing at stake whatsoever. Yeah.
But my main reason for choosing Dracula's daughter was I was looking through ones that hadn't been chosen yet, and when I saw that this was essentially a direct sequel to Dracula that then had almost nothing to do with the first movie.
Yes.
I love when that happens in Hollywood, when you get a sequel that I my first job ever was working at a video store. So I loved when we get sequels like that, the American Psycho sequel that has Mila Kunis in it.
Right.
I still to this day don't know how that's connected to American Psycho, and I don't care. I think I love when a studio has some weird backroom financial, an option is expiring type reason to make a movie, and then creatives have to just work around that.
Yeah, that was what struck me about this one, is that this is sort of how Sony needs to keep making Spider-Man movies at regular intervals, or else they lose the rights. This was a case of where Universal was going to lose the rights to Bram Stoker's works to MGM, I think. And so they rushed this into production before the script was even finished, because they just needed to get it out by a certain date.
Sort of thing would never happen today, Dalton.
Yes, a common practice throughout the history of Hollywood. This is I guess theoretically, they say it's based on a lost chapter from Dracula, or a chapter that was cut and then released as a short story. Apparently, though, that's just like the Black Cat, where it's suggested by this chapter and has nothing to do with it.
It has nothing at all to do with Dracula's guest.
It has more to do with the novel Carmilla, which we can get into a little bit later, because this movie is gay as hell. This is
extremely so, yes,
a shockingly gay movie for 1936. And it's not even directed by James Whale.
No,
and it's even gayer than James Whale.
They wanted James Whale and he didn't want to do it. So someone must have stepped up the challenge, being I know what you want from this film. I got it. So they got instead. The director that they did get was Lambert Hillier, who is the kind of director who began his career in the silent era shooting 9 movies a year and continued to direct 9 movies a year into the mid 40s.
So he's Steven Soderbergh.
Okay, listen. First of all, I don't think that this movie is impressive enough to apply Soderbergh to as any kind of parallel. And also, we have Dom Griffin, one of the internet's biggest Steven Soderbergh fans, here on the show today.
It was a compliment to Steven Soderbergh.
I could see him making this movie, though. I could see him having 6 months in between Ocean's movies and being yeah, I'll do it. Okay.
All the love to Steven Soderbergh, no disrespect intended, and no disrespect to this movie, which I actually love. I really love this. Another opportunity where this was a classic Universal movie I hadn't seen, and then a guest picks it, and I'm holy shit, this is really good.
I went in assuming it was maybe not gonna be any good, and sometimes that's fun. You know what I mean? I think that when it comes to the idea of remaking or re-envisioning something, if you can start from something that doesn't work at all, that's like a easy layup. Then you can just kind of figure out like where it went wrong. But no, I ended up actually really liking it. I thought it was very charming.
There's a lot of really good stuff in it. I was really taken in by all of the characters. Like everyone seems to have a lot more personality than a lot of the original classic monster movies, like even the original Dracula or something like The Mummy or something. Like there's so many just sort of like weird little relationships, and you get a lot of interplay that's like not plot related but is very fun. That sort of drew me in addition to this having some severe lesbian overtones. So if you're not familiar with Carmilla, listeners out there, Carmilla is one of the earliest works of vampire literature and predates Dracula by a couple decades, I think, and is also the birth of the sort of lesbian vampire trope. It's about a young woman who is stalked by a female vampire, and it has become like sort of the Bible for gay horror people in the century since. And there are lots of movie adaptations of Carmilla, some more direct than others, some more oblique. But this, I believe, is the first sort of adaptation of a lot of those plot elements and themes on film ever. And we'll get into it, I guess, as we go through the plot summary. But there's a couple like pretty starkly like lesbian interactions in this. It was surprising to me.
Yeah, I was actually caught off guard by there's a scene in which we'll have to set the stage for this a little bit. We have the Dracula's daughter, the titular character, is Countess Maria Zaleska, and she is very much a put together high society sort of vamp, if you will. Was unclear at first whether she's a literal vampire or is somehow entranced by Count Dracula. This being a sequel to 1931's Dracula, it opens with the death of Dracula.
Yeah, it's like an immediate sequel, which
yes.
We've seen, I think, a couple times. Like I believe Bride of Frankenstein is very similar with the original Frankenstein.
Yeah, picks up right where the last one left off.
Yeah, like they're literally still in the basement of the castle with like the stake in Dracula's heart and Renfield dead on the floor. Although his name was Renfield?
They call him Renfield in this.
Okay.
But yes, so Maria eventually we learn is full on vampire with all of the classic universal Dracula powers. Although we don't see her turn into a bat or anything.
No, budget.
She
budget too small.
Could not afford that string. And so there's a scene in which she has her manservant, whose name is Sandor, go out onto the street and summon a young lady to her apartment under the pretense of being a model for one of her paintings.
Already gay. Already Portrait of a Woman on Fire gay.
And so the young woman... The young woman is there to be for a modeling study of the neck and shoulders of a woman, and so she's
not a model, by the way.
No,
she is just sort of abducted and taken to this studio.
But it's a gig is a gig, Dalton. It's hard out there. And she does get wise to the fact that she's probably in danger,
yes.
And so after she's like. She strips down to like her slip and lets like the shoulder straps go over, and it's like very pointed. She's like, "You need these down, right?"
Lots of skin.
It's
shown.
very steamy, and only as Dracula's daughter is advancing on her does she realize, "I'm not safe here. I need to get out." And that's when we get sort of the hypnotism and the leering, and then the slow advance. We don't see any contact, but it's very suggestive.
And in sort of classic like 1930s, gay people on screen, it is also portrayed as predatory, right? I think that's pretty common with the history of queer horror, is that you'll have monsters represent queer people, but then as a result, their queerness is portrayed as being violent and predatory. Like this is a woman who, as we established, is like poor on the street and needs money and is taken in. She is basically cruised by Countess Dracula and taken in, and then, changes her mind and doesn't want to be there anymore. And yet, Dracula takes advantage of her anyway. So, it is sort of that double-edged sword of like, wow, hey, great, this movie is gay. It's Pride Month, yay. But like, well, but it's what it's saying about being gay is not great. So, that's a complex legacy that I think is beyond the scope of this podcast to fully dissect. But watch Queer for Fear on Shudder for more on that. There's a whole episode about Carmilla stuff. So yeah, do we want to kind of walk through this plot a little step by step?
Yeah, I think so. So I think, as we said, right, that the intro of the film is essentially I think in my notes I put like it's like the how it should have ended of the first Dracula movie.
Yes,
it's just like one of those like dumb like plot hole questions of like, well, Van Helsing kills Dracula and now cops show up. How do you explain this? It's like, oh no, it's okay. Like I killed him, but he's been dead for 500 years, so you can't get me for murder. It's like double jeopardy or something. And it's like, what about the other guy? And it's like, oh no, I didn't kill that guy. Dracula killed that guy. I killed Dracula. And it's like, dude, this is not helping you. You can't go to court with this. And Van Helsing was just like, no, vampires are real. I killed one. I did a good thing. I did a human service for you all. And there's like this pair of kind of adorably bumbling cops, like where one is like very silly, like Andy Griffith show level silly, and the other one's like pretty serious at his job. And they take Van Helsing away, and he has to figure out how to like prove his innocence. But I think that there's a little bit too much of this plot centers around this bit because it's so like goofy. But I love how Van Helsing is like he doesn't think this is weird. He's like, no. Well, I have a friend who's a therapist, Professor Garth. He will help me here. And it's like, I don't know how he thought that was going to help him other than he knows Garth.
He's totally cool.
Like, he knows me. He knows what's up, man. He knows the vampires are real.
Completely unperturbed. Yeah. He's just like completely cool as a cucumber. He's like the level of cool being arrested as like a super villain in like a Bond or a Mission Impossible movie where like
my men are already coming to pick me up.
Like,
don't worry about it.
It seems like he has like a bullet. He's like, this isn't a problem for me. Of course I did the right thing, but he doesn't actually have a plan. And yeah, I like how you mentioned this is sort of like the ending Dracula didn't have, because all of these early pre-code movies just end like that. Like there's no denouement. There is just, as soon as the main plot line reaches its climax, credits. Like even this movie, like there's never any like tying up of loose ends or like, well, wait, but okay, so now what happens with Van Helsing or all these people? Like
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Dracula's dead. Hit the credits. Like we're out in 70 minutes.
We get no indication. Not that we need one, really. We don't have to do another movie to explain how this one should have ended, right? But like, we don't ever get an indication that Van Helsing is not going to go to prison for this, right?
That's true. They never actually wrap up like his trial storyline. Like that's sort of what the movie is built on at the beginning. We never find out if he finds a successful defense.
Sure, and like Garth is now definitely. I mean, you know what? Garth isn't even fully convinced about the vampire thing by the end of the movie. So he's more likely to testify, Van Helsing, or Von Helsing, as he's called in this movie, is not crazy. But now he's just going to look crazy. There's still no material evidence of any kind. And but it's just a device to try and introduce a new sort of human protagonist into the story and a way to keep Van Helsing, the only returning actor from the first Dracula in Edward Van Sloan, as a device for him to be in the movie and to pick up where they left off. So there's some connecting thread.
Yeah, so we get this psychiatrist Garth, which is he's Dr. Jeffrey Garth. Great name. He looks like Richard Elfman for like the 5 listeners who are going to understand that reference. And just sort of like a stuffy psychiatrist guy who comes into town. He's on like a hunting retreat or something. It doesn't matter.
He is like you mentioned. He is a specific character. I do have to say, I dislike him.
Yeah, he's not a likable dude, but that sets up the greatest character in the movie.
Yes.
His secretary, Janet, played by the most beautiful woman in cinema history. What's her
Marguerite Churchill.
Marguerite Churchill. Goddamn, I fell so... If you've seen our Twitter feed, I was tweeting about this. I fell so in love with Marguerite Churchill in this movie. She is sassy and funny, and she gives her boss shit, and she has the most beautiful outfits and dresses throughout the entire movie. She's basically just here to make Garth's life miserable and get a paycheck from him the whole time. They're kind of flirty. They kind of hate each other. She's like prank calling him in the middle of meetings.
They have a prank war.
Yeah.
Act 2 of this movie includes like a long prank war between the secretary and this psychologist.
Which Janet 1,000% wins.
Oh,
She's way better than him.
For sure. Yeah.
oh man, is she a knockout? I'm going to go back in time and I'm going to marry her. And then you guys can keep pitching movies that I will then be in the credits of because I'll get a job on the lot somewhere.
Right. This is going to become a weird time paradox.
Yes. I'm going to invent the dark universe back then. I guess they did that with House of Dracula.
Yes.
I should check the credits of House of Dracula and see if I'm in there.
You best start believing in time travel stories. Listen. Janet is great. There's weird little things that sort of date the movie, obviously, like in the ways of how, like, the excuse for, she's so sassy and smart. Oh, well, she's a baron's daughter. She's highborn, okay? Mm-hmm. That's why she's smarter and able to get away with. Yeah, she's allowed to be smart. But Dr. Garth he's not enough of a cad to be a fun cad.
I think he's fun, though, in his dynamic with Janet. Like, if Janet wasn't there, he would just be insufferable. But the fact that you kind of get to keep seeing him get dunked on makes him not likable, but tolerable on screen, at least for me. I don't know.
I also never really understand why, other than, I suppose, to just provide stakes and to maybe make the finale feel a little bit more heterosexual. Countess Maria, eventually, her plan in this film is to get Dr. Garth to use his psychological skills to somehow free her from the curse of the vampire. Which is where it feels weird that the implication at first is that she has been mesmerized in some way to behave like a vampire. There's a weird line in the beginning where she tries to demonstrate that she is human or able to be human now by playing something jaunty on the piano.
She says, I can finally play normal music.
And then and her manservant Sandor, just basically every time she says something positive, it's just like, bullshit, it's actually twisted and dark. It's like, damn it.
She's like playing this beautiful piece on the piano. She's like, you can just envision a beautiful forest. And he's like, full of wolves. And she's like, no, it's not.
So she wants Dr. Garth to hypnotize her, basically to make her free of being a vampire. Now, we don't have to like kind of enforce, like, we're not doing CinemaSin shit here to be like, well, that's not how vampire rules work. This movie is allowed to have its own fucking vampire rules if they want to, right? We don't have to. But her idea at first is she's going to have Garth free her using hypnosis. When Garth kind of gets wise to her due to the other attacks that she's doing, she tries to extort him by kidnapping Janet, the fun secretary.
Well, let's rewind a bit and go back to the beginning of Countess Zaleska's entrance. Because the first thing she does in the movie is she breaks into the prison to steal Dracula's corpse, which she then burns and covers in salt. And that's sort of her first attempt, I think, at freeing herself from Dracula. So she is, like you said, an unwilling vampire, basically. And we never find out if she is like an actual daughter of Dracula's. Did he fuck someone and have a vampire daughter? We never find out about a Dracula's daughter's mother. We also don't know if it's just daughter as in he bit her and made her a vampire, sort of like she's just of his lineage, or whether she's just like entranced. But it doesn't seem like it's that, because she does have the ability to like lure people in with her cool ring.
Right. And her victims die in the same fashion as Lucy in the 31 Dracula.
So she definitely
in fact,
has powers.
I believe the same stock footage of an operating theater is used in both films. So it does seem as if Dracula's a vampire, she's a vampire.
But I think it's very interesting that her whole motivation is to be cured. Again, going back to the gay undertones. Like, essentially, this movie is about a lesbian who can't stop herself from preying upon young women and like wants to be fixed, quote unquote, and wants to be normal and wants to be cured of her hunger and cured of her desire. And so she turns to the modern and new area of science, psychiatry, which can fix anything. As we saw in The Black Cat, it can even give you the powers of a medium. So it might even just be that like people thought psychiatry in the 1930s was like a cure-all for everything. Like, yeah, that could cure a vampire. Of course, it's magic. It's brain magic. But yeah, it definitely still ties into like the homosexual undertones that she's like, please cure me. Please, older man, cure me of my desires.
Right. And if we carry that thread through, then we can kind of figure out why she would be drawn to Dr. Garth as potentially an eternal companion at that point. Because towards the end, after a little bit of back and forth investigation of some murders, She kidnaps Janet, also very erotically, and uses her to extort from Dr. Garth, first the hope of getting sort of de-vampired. But when that seems like that's no longer in the question, she offers to free Janet in exchange for Garth joining her as a vampire for all eternity. Now, there is like nothing attractive about Dr. Garth whatsoever, but he does have the advantage of being a man. So I guess if we were reading this as her trying to straighten out, as it were, then the idea of, if I can't be cured of being a vampire, then at least I can be a straight vampire from here on out.
She's looking for a beard.
Yeah, she's like, I just need a really good beard forever, like until the end of time.
Be my eternal beard.
Now, Sandor doesn't take kindly to this. He's the classic familiar who has been promised immortality and has been, kept on the back burner forever. And so when...
He's our Guillermo.
Yeah. When Dr. Garth, even though he only half believes in this vampire shit to begin with, he can't wake Janet. So he's like, fine, I'll go to your deal. And it's like, really, like he literally shrugs, like, fine, I'll do it. That is when the Countess Maria gets shot through the heart with an arrow by Sandor. And down she goes, and she's dead, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, that's basically it, because Sandor gets shot as well. There's a whole the whole big climax with her like seducing Janet is another very gay scene. What does this say? I was reading that some people call it the longest kiss never filmed, where basically like Countess Dracula is like looming over Janet and just like they're staring in each other's eyes, and it's so drawn out, and she's like slowly lowering herself, and then she lowers herself to bite her, but from the angle it's filmed at, it just looks like she's going in for a kiss. Like it is, you can't tell that she's going for the neck at all. You just see her sort of lower herself in front of Janet. And then, things get interrupted and she just hypnotizes her or whatever. But yeah, then she gets shot by the arrow from Sandor, hoisted by her own petard by not, giving her familiar what he wants. Let that be a lesson to any vampires out there. You gotta flip your familiars at some point, right?
Pay your workers.
Pay your workers. The familiars are unionizing. My familiars have unionized. Yeah, so she gets shot, and then Sandor goes to shoot Garth, but then he is shot by Scotland Yard instead. And then Van Helsing shows up and says, and they're looking at Countess Dracula's body, and they go, she's beautiful.
She was beautiful when she died 100 years ago. And that's the end of the film.
Again, no resolution on... actually, so they do sort of talk about the case, Van Helsing's case there at the end, right? They're like, see, now we can prove that this is someone else like Dracula, and we know that she killed this other girl in this way, and so this somehow absolves Van Helsing. They do speak as if finding Countess Dracula's body is going to be the thing that breaks the case wide open and gives Van Helsing his freedom. Again, I'm not sure I buy that, but he is a very wealthy, famous white guy in 1936, so I think he'll probably get away with it.
This version of Van Helsing is never seen again. They could have executed him for all we know.
Also, they changed his name.
Yeah, why is he Von Helsing
He
now?
is Von Helsing in this movie and Van Helsing in the 1931.
Oh, you know what? Throw it all out. Non-canonical.
Yeah.
It's all fucked now. We've been going on and on for a while. Dom, what are your feelings?
My feelings about Dracula's Daughter is I think that it's like this thing where it feels like two separate movies, right? One is a very cartoonish movie, picking up the strands from the last Dracula film, and that stuff is like entertaining, because like every one of these little characters has their own little like quirk.
Yeah.
They're they're entertaining. They're fun to watch. The only thing is, in the middle of it, you get this much more compelling thing with the Countess and her trying to rid herself of vampirism and stuff. And I was really taken with the idea that she seemed so stoked to find out that Dracula died. Like she literally ran over there to be, oh, he's dead? I'm free.
Yeah.
And she does this whole ritual and is like, fuck, I still want to drink blood though. Like girl blood.
Yeah.
And then she just starts panicking and being like, all right, I gotta go to therapy. Like this isn't working. And the thing with the salts, I did the whole it's not happening.
This is the thing though, that this really is, the whole thing smacks of gender, because you know what, men would literally live for 500 years drinking blood than rather do that than go in therapy.
And you know what, she's like, I drank one person's blood, I really got to get myself some help. And good on her.
Intervention.
To me, I read it as though the title was just the title, and that she was just someone who he had sired, you know?
Yeah.
And that she just sort of probably whatever the lore was that, if Dracula dies, then like all of his sires stop being vampires, and someone clearly just lied to her, and she's still stuck with it. And that's where it becomes like, okay, is she still stuck with actual legit vampirism? Or is whatever she still has actually just a mixed up part of her repressing her own sexual identity? And it's just manifesting as the thing she's been for 100 years, which is just sucking strangers' bloods and stuff. So like, I thought that stuff in the middle was like very like weird and like dreamy and compelling. But then like it also still has to circle back around to like the goofy shit with Von Helsing. And then, of course, all the really fun screwball stuff with Garth and Janet.
Yeah.
And then almost that their interplay almost feels like they're taunting her. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's, they don't know, but it's almost like every 1930s screwball comedy with like two cutesy, sniping, bantering leads is following her around, just being like, this is what straight people do. They prank call each other and all this stuff. And she's just like, I don't do any of that. I just wait till the poor girl beats hunger, and then I paint her, and then I kill her. Like I don't know how to do any of this stuff.
She's literally that meme of Squidward looking out the window at SpongeBob and Patrick running out in the yard.
Yes. It's just like, I don't know what to do with any of that. This is just, I got nothing. And then that sort of almost casts her familiar as like, they're not like unpaid labor. They're like in the friend zone, kind of like, if I just wait around long enough, she's got to make me immortal, man. Like, I've done all this nice things for her. Yeah. I go find her girls to gawk over on bridges. When is going to be my time? You
Maybe
know?
she's at least bi.
Yeah.
There's this extra sleaziness to the top of the guy who's just like, are you going to turn me or what? And she's like, have you not been paying attention? I want to get rid of this shit. He's like, okay, but me first.
Yeah.
Then you can get rid of it. You know, like, come on.
Make me a lesbian.
Again, it just feels like the kind of movie that comes out of like, we have this much amount of time, this much amount of money. We got to keep the rights to this thing. I mean, even the Von Helsing thing just kind of feels like you were rushing so much that you're, what was it called again? Vaughn? That's fine, whatever. Like, no, I think I already fucking wrote it on the clapboard, didn't I?
Like, you know, we have the reels right over there in the library.
Like, there's just no continuity or whatever. They just kind of had to throw it together. But it's one of those rare instances where each of those disparate elements does work together. Like, it's an hour and 11 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's not a lot of fluff.
I was surprised at how good it is, knowing that like it sort of was rushed into production and that it's a sequel to one of the most legendary films of all time. And it's not one you really hear about, you know? It's not like Bride of Frankenstein where everyone's like, oh my God, this is the sequel. Like Dracula's Daughter is largely forgotten and doesn't get a lot of like home video releases or things like that. So I went into it expecting like, oh, this is probably going to be rough. But I was really surprised at how good it is. And I also like, you know, I think listeners of this show will not be surprised to hear this, but of course I like sequels that are big departures from the originals.
Do you like when a sequel is not at all the same kind of movie as the previous story?
I may have just gotten roasted on our Discord for my Bride of Frankenstein pitch, and I appreciate that. Thank you for the feedback.
Yes, and please, anyone who wants to roast Dalton, and to a lesser extent me, please join our Discord.
Respectfully, please.
Sign up for a free 7-day trial at patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton, and help to fundraise for the upcoming second podcast feed, Are You Afraid of Dylan and Dalton, where we talk about anything but this.
Please do not sign up for a 7-day free trial just to pop in the Discord and call me a dumbass and then leave. That would not be nice.
If you're going to do that, please at least pay for 1 month of the Discord.
No, just don't call me a dumbass.
You can also call Dalton a dumbass for free on Twitter, Instagram, or Blue Sky at Dark Universe Pod.
Yes, call me a dumbass there because I can block you there. But
if you want to call me a sweet little angel, You can reach me on all those same platforms.
Dylan is now the fan's angel after the Phantom of the Opera pitch, and he can do no wrong in anyone's eyes.
And that's okay, because Dalton's going to probably absolutely smoke my ass with whatever musical they do in season 3. So,
but I like that this takes the original Dracula. It's like, okay, he's not going to be in it. Fuck him. We're done with him. Partially because Bela Lugosi doesn't want to, but also like. No Dracula. We're gonna get a female lead. We're gonna go full SJW. We've got the woke mind virus. We're going female Dracula.
Go broke.
Yep. And also make it like about a vampire who doesn't want to be a vampire. Like, I think that's a compelling idea for a sequel. Like, oh, let's find another vampire who's like desperately trying to stop. You know, gay undertones aside, like the idea that like. It makes her a sympathetic figure in a way that the original Dracula isn't. More along the lines of your Wolfman or your Frankenstein, where it's like, yes, she does some bad things and she gets killed for them, but like the whole time she's like, I know this is wrong, but like I'm sort of magically compelled to do this. Someone please save me from this.
Right.
And I think that's an interesting take.
Yeah, the 31 Dracula doesn't really have that sort of vampirism is a curse angle to it. Like it's in the book, it's in other adaptations, but like the idea that he's like the ghost is Dracula is way into being Dracula. He loves it, he relishes it.
It seems pretty rad to him, yeah.
And so now we have the other side of the classic sort of vampire story, which is like, I get to be immortal, but I have to do terrible things.
At what cost?
Yeah. Also want to add, while we're comparing the two characters, Maria reprises the famous line, "I never drink wine." And her version of it fucking rules. It's so much. I prefer her line delivery. It's like that one on top, and then Spanish Dracula, and then English Dracula.
Yeah, it's performances are great.
I also think fucking Christopher Lee does it at some point too. So we'll put that in the list.
Does he really?
I think he does in the first Hammer Dracula.
I need to rewatch it.
I think he might actually. I watched it a few months ago.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this film?
No, I mean, I think I think it was like a real gem. I definitely chose it with sort of like a throwing the dartboard mentality. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm actually really glad that it turned out to be like actually really good. Because I don't know, I feel like I've watched a lot of really like extremely mediocre movies in the last like 9 months. So anytime I can squeeze in one that's like, oh, hey, I'm going to remember this. There's things about this that are going to stick with me. It's nice.
Yeah. I've been kind of wary about watching all of the Universal Monsters sequels because I just assumed it was a steep drop off because you just never hear about like the third Invisible Man movie. And like some of the documentaries on the like Blu-ray releases make it sound like they get pretty bad as they go on, you know, but this has me curious because it's one that you never hear about and was very impressed by it. And goddamn Janet. Oh,
well, you're gonna have to get into westerns now, so you can get into like the peak of her career. You're gonna have to like watch like 7 John Wayne movies now.
Just to watch Marguerite Churchill. I'll do it for you, baby. I'll watch all the John Wayne movies for you.
All right. Well, with that, I guess we can throw to our break. Take it just a second, and then when we return, we're gonna hear Dominic Griffin pitch his new version of Dracula's daughter for our dark universe. We'll see you in 30 to 60 seconds.
Stick around.
Amber, we're popular enough to plug the show. What's our show?
Hi, my name is Amber Autumn, she, her, and this is my co-host, Prince Devin, he, him, and we make a show called Original Podcast Do Not Steal, which is a weekly podcast in which every week we take your favorite intellectual properties, franchise, show, hope, dream, idea, and we make an original character in that property.
Joke insert here, pretend we're funny.
30 seconds is so short. Okay, thanks, bye.
Bye.
Welcome back, everybody, to Are You Afraid of the Dark Universe? We are about to hear Dom's pitch for a remake of Dracula's Daughter. After we have just established a lot of Dracula lore, we're about to complicate it even more. And as we said earlier, full penetration. Hard R. Hard R rating.
Okay. So my pitch is honestly pretty broad, and I kind of figured we would like drill into it because I didn't see making it fit with your Dracula lore as like a bad thing. I actually thought it was like a kind of a fun challenge. And like in my vision, like if you were going to remake this movie like now, this would not be in the same wheelhouse as some of the other projects you guys have in the canon. Is like they're very large. You know what I mean? They're very ambitious. They're big movies you can release in like the springtime or the summer or what have you. I pictured this as being something much smaller and much cheaper. So you can kind of get away with a little more stuff. That's where you fit in the penetration. But I wanted to essentially jettison everything from the movie that we just watched, except for the core journey of watching the Countess try to get rid of being a vampire.
Love that. And
in Dracula Lives, I know there's the whole aftermath of like once Dracula goes back to being a person, that everyone he ever sired, like it just is done and dusted basically. And I haven't figured out the real logistic part of the lore here, but I love the idea of our Dark Universe Countess somehow being someone who survived that somehow.
I actually have an idea how she might have done that, but we'll get to it.
Oh, good. So much of the way I envision the story is being kind of an erotic thriller, and then also kind of like a small scale mystery. And I picture it being a little bit artier and a little bit less broad. So I'm kind of picturing being something that's not quite as opaque as like Underneath the Skin. Is that what that's called? The movie with Scarlett Johansson.
Under the Skin,
creepy, sexy alien. Under the Skin, yeah. Like I picture it being similar to that in terms of like tone, but not quite as opaque. Where it's all subjective and we're all with the Countess. We're following her around. We're never cutting away to other characters or anyone else. And I envision it really opening sort of like as a backdoor ending from Dracula, from House of Dracula, where this character that we don't know her deal is, what her stuff is. We just watch her thinking she's free and not being free. And in a way, it kind of like parallels the first chapter of Dracula Lives, where it's Dracula coming to terms with having to be like a human and being like not strong. And instead it's this woman who thought she was going to be rid of this curse and is not. And it's just her dealing with the fact that she thinks she can be normal and that she just can't. And much of the way I picture that going down is like very similar to the stuff that happens in the version we just saw, only with what I imagine to be like a very different take on going to therapy for it. Like I pictured there being sort of an ongoing framing sequence of her seeing a figure like Dr. Garth, but who is not quite so like irritating, and he doesn't have his own Janet. Obviously, it would just be
no
like
one could compete with Janet. We can't even try to have a new Janet.
So, but I imagine it being a figure who seems earnest at first, seems like someone who actually wants to understand this woman, and obviously doesn't believe that she's an otherworldly creature of the night and thinks he can cure her and thinks it's all just a metaphor for her trauma. And on some level it is. And there would just be ongoing scenes of him trying to get to know her more and trying to understand her. But then we would start to realize that like this version of Dr. Garth is actually enamored by all this stuff about her. He thinks it's interesting. He thinks it's like kind of like quirky and weird that she is this way. And as a result, he starts to just kind of other her. And like clearly this woman has this very queer-coded vampirism going on. But I think that this doctor just thinks it's like hot. I think he just thinks that this is just an interesting thing about this woman. He thinks he's going to end up like betting her somehow. And throughout this dalliance between the two of them, there would just be escalation of her realizing she's not actually going to get the help she wants from this guy, of her realizing that she's going to have to keep drinking blood for however many more years. And then, also trying to build some mystery as to figuring out why this is the way it is. Because someone must have told her that she would be free of this curse if these things came to pass, and then she's not. So I would kind of see it as being like a twin journey thing of like her going through the therapy stuff with this, unscrupulous, pervy doctor, but then also trying to reach out to like more clandestine, horror figures or something to try to figure out why she's still stuck with this curse. But that's about as far as I got into it, because I couldn't figure out how to really square the fact that if you were to make this story today, it would have to be a lot more explicit. The queer codedness wouldn't be so silent. It wouldn't be so withheld by the Hays Code. It would have to be something that we could actually wrestle with and actually extrapolate. And if you go that route, you're trying to really honor that kind of internal like turmoil, then you can't have like a convenient, jaded, familiar character who kills her at the end. You know what I mean? Like you can't have certain easy outs that these other movies kind of have just by virtue of being 70-minute long black and white horror movies from the 30s. So that's kind of the conundrum I had, was just trying to figure out like where I see her journey going and how it ends. But that's kind of like the vision I have, is like, I think that you could tell this story. You get like a really, really compelling lead to play this part, someone who could really make a meal out of it. You get, you know, a filmmaker like Amy Seimetz or someone who knows how to do things that are very raw and real with character, but also isn't afraid to let stuff just be open-ended. Let stuff just be kind of like symbol. Let stuff be things that the audience has to kind of piece together for themselves.
Right.
I 100% see this as being like essentially like, I don't know, like whatever the opposite of a loss leader is for the studio. Like, it's sort of like the only way we get this made is like there's some actors we really like. And we think we're going to get some awards and like some festival buzz off of it.
Well, it's been a while. That was sort of our idea with, I think, Frankenstein, right? Was that would be our like sort of serious artsy horror movie. And ever since, we've gone blockbuster. So I think it's time for us to use all these profits we've made with the Dark Universe to make something artsier that will definitely lose money, but will maybe pick up some critical adoration, you know?
Absolutely. And Amy Seimetz, I think, is a very interesting choice as a director for the project.
What has she directed?
Okay, so she's done a lot of television. The Killing is one of her things.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, she didn't direct that. She's just in it, right?
Yeah, no, she's an actress, but she's also directed a lot of television. She did a few episodes of Atlanta. She did all of Stars, has a show based on Soderbergh's Girlfriend Experience.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a really good show. Most recently, she did a movie, She Dies Tomorrow, which is about a bunch of like interconnected characters in Los Angeles who all have like this like thought disease. Like they all are just sharing this literally like a disease where just one of them just wakes up and just thinks they're going to die the next day. And they can't articulate why. They just know in their bones they're going to die. And it'll just be this thing in a scene where it's like confusing and weird, and the person like seems they're breaking down. And then whoever was just telling them that's insane, how could you feel that way? Within a few scenes, they're feeling it. And like the actor just immediately starts selling like, this is it for me. Like I'm done. And it's such a weird and like dark and moody movie. But I remember thinking like, these are the people we should be asking to make our horror movies. Do you know what I mean? Like these are the people that I think can really pull out more of the atmospheric stuff of this kind of horror. Because so much of the modern horror, even stuff I like, is really just kind of someone being like, hey, this thing, it's a metaphor for this trauma. And they just sort of say that really early on. And the whole movie, we're like, yep, it's like when your mom died, only you're a zombie. And, you know, that's okay, though. You're going to work through it. And they kill the zombie. And it's like, now I'm cool with my mom being dead. Thanks. You know, and I don't want to do that sort of thing where it's just that blunt and obvious, but something that works within that middle ground, something that explores like that gray area, you know, where I think some people might watch it and come out feeling one way, and some are going to come out thinking like, hey, it's kind of fucked up that you guys try to make being gay, being like a vampire, even though Anne Rice made a whole career out of doing it or whatever. You guys can't.
No, I really like that. Yeah, I feel like that sweet spot is like, you do want your horror to mean something, but you don't want to just tell the audience what it means, you know? And I feel like this is something I tried to do with my Black Lagoon pitch, where like, you know, is definitely about this young person coming out as trans, but like I wasn't just like, the creature is like being trans, you know? Like I was try to make a like you said, something where you can come away from it with different ideas of what it a story that asks questions instead of answers them,
right? And that's something that
exactly.
I remember in that episode of the show in the Black Lagoon, you said something which I think was a quote from a movie about the Andy Warhol scene. Or
I gotta look up. I can find what movie that was.
It was really interesting, which you said, Pop never asks a question it doesn't know the answer to.
Yes.
And I found that really interesting. I've been thinking about it, trying to keep that in mind with everything that I've written since, which I think is just Dracula Lives. And I think it's a good watchword for us going forward, and trying to make at least a portion of our films a little bit more experimental, a little bit more expressionistic, and a little bit less rigid thematically.
By the way, that movie, a few episodes later, finally getting to the title of it, I couldn't remember it because it's called Untitled. It's
Great.
a film called Parentheses, Untitled, Close Parentheses.
Super not at all pretentious name for your film.
Yes. Well, it's a comedy movie about basically the pretension of the New York City art scene, which is why that scene is in it.
Criticism withdrawn.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this pitch, and I have so many ideas as you were talking that it really sparked a lot of things in me. I love that. First of all, like you said, like there's this sort of subgenre of horror, which is basically like quiet movies about a female predator. One of them being like Under the Skin, but also like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, right? Which is these sort of art house movies about, female monsters, for lack of a better word, sort of preying on the people around them. But it also is kind of like the Hannibal TV show. And I think those two actually go together pretty well. And first of all, I think there might actually be a way to make this canon.
Yeah, I had two ideas about it. Let's hear yours first.
So my idea was Dracula himself in the 1931 film hypnotizes people with his eyes, right? He has this Dracula look and his hand comes out and he hypnotizes them. Dracula's daughter uses a ring. It is a piece of jewelry. It is not her herself. Like you can even see her reflecting the light into people's eyes. And it actually made me wonder, does she have vampire powers or does she have this enchanted ring that does things? And I think based on her actually drinking people's blood, whatever, like she does. But I'm wondering, the idea I have is maybe Dracula didn't turn her into a vampire in a particular, in the usual way, but in fact gave her this sort of cursed ring that she can't take off. And because it was a gift from Dracula, she has been told that the ring, that she won't be able to take it off until Dracula is dead. And then Dracula dies and it's still on her finger and she can't get rid of it. And what we'll find out, maybe we don't, is that it's actually from the Master, which we establish in Dracula Lives. It is an older magic than even Dracula. Like he may have given it to her, but he doesn't control it. What I like is the idea of playing with the parallel of Dracula preying upon her the same way this psychiatrist is now, where I like the idea of Dracula's daughter. Maybe we make her an explicitly gay character, right? She's a lesbian, but that wasn't good enough for Dracula. Dracula wanted her. And so he took possession of her, literally by possessing her with this ring that made her like him. And now she finds this psychiatrist who she thinks is a good person, who is going to help her escape the thrall that she's under. But he turns out to be just like Dracula. He knows all these things about her. He knows she's not interested, that she's here for help, but he ignores them because he's only interested in owning her and possessing her. And I like the idea of like, we never do a flashback to Dracula. And instead, as the story continues, the psychiatrist is replaced by Dracula, like in her mind. She starts seeing both of them. And we never know, is she talking to the actual Dracula? Is this a memory or is she in the present? Like the two of them start to get mixed up in her head and in the way we see them through the camera. And so we never have to do like, let's flash back and see how she became Dracula's daughter. No, it's just the conversations she's having with the psychiatrist are the same conversations she had with Dracula then, and their motivations were the same. And we sort of, as the film goes, we accelerate the tension by introducing Dracula more and more and the psychiatrist less and less and equating the two of them together. That was my thought.
Yeah, fuck my idea. Yours is really way more interesting than I was going to say.
What was your idea?
Oh, mine was just way less interesting. I'm thinking about the idea that she has believed for, the entirety of her vampire life that she was part of Dracula's line, but she's actually attached to the as yet unrevealed, remaining bloodline of the Master's daughter. And then she has to, but that's not really thematically relevant to what we were talking about. It was me just trying to mechanically solve the problem. Your idea is so much better.
It's kind of actually, in your defense, it's kind of how I originally pictured it too, was like, well, you could build to some kind of reveal that wasn't her sire. Like I actually envisioned it being something where like Dracula was like passing her around with other vampires. You know what I mean? And like, she just doesn't remember this core traumatic moment because it was just so much, so much was going on. And because that's who she was around the whole time, that's what she always just thought that's what it was. But then it becomes a thing of like, okay, you flash back to the real thing. It's like, actually, Dracula didn't bite you. That was Steve. And then it's just like, you got to go kill Steve now. And like, that's not really, you don't really get anything out of that. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, like
all right,
it wouldn't mean anything.
Steve.
Whereas this is a much more interesting.
Yeah,
and I love the idea. And this is not to hijack your pitch either, Dom. This is, but I do.
No, this is good because my thing has so many holes. This is like,
and you are of course able to push back on anything we say.
Yeah, if you want to counter pitch us on anything. But I like the idea, and I also really dig the idea of this movie being. We talked about it being smaller movie in terms of budget, in terms of production. I like the idea of it maybe being the kind of movie that's relatively few characters, like maybe we have 3 main leads and almost no supporting. Like I'm talking about the kind of movie you would shoot over the height of COVID, where you use relatively few sets and it's very much like a locked room fucking stage play where she's having these. Now I'm just seeing it as a stage play, which is not useful for us because we're trying to make imaginary movies here. But where most of it takes place in, a couple of acts that are basically these individual sessions. Have either of you seen, Dalton, I'm pretty sure you haven't, but like, Dom, have you seen Good Luck to You, Leo Grand?
No. It's I know of it, but I didn't watch it. No.
Okay, so the movie Good Luck to You, Leo Grand is a sort of romantic comedy starring Emma Thompson as a retired ethics teacher who hires a sex worker to try and get her to have her first good sex. And the movie takes place over the course of 3 appointments that they make. And like each act is a different appointment. And there's almost no other characters that come in and out, but it's pretty much all takes place in the same hotel room where they meet and they end up working out a lot of their individual baggage. And I now I'm thinking of this is like the evil version of that, where we have a character who is trying to solve a problem that she can't solve on her own. And it's very much wrapped up in sex and repression and guilt. And the person, in this case, the person that she goes to help, it doesn't turn like that movie ends up being sort of a Socratic argument for the legalization of sex work. This one would be, not that. But the idea that this becomes sort of a tete-a-tete where the power dynamic keeps changing between the two of them. But in this case, we have occasionally this sort of switch up between these conversations and either in the same place or in a similar setting, cutting back and forth their interactions with Dracula. That might be too small than we're thinking. That might be too, might not be give us opportunities for any kills or anything too lurid.
I think that's kind of a middle ground, which is like, I'm pretty sure you guys have probably both seen this at one point or other. Chris Nolan's first movie, Following. Very, very small scale movie. Shot it for like $7,000 or whatever over the course of a year. Catering was always like McDonald's breakfast, but that's a movie where the thrust of the story is like a present day thing where the main character is being interrogated by the police. And then whenever they go off where he needs to explain something or tell a story, rather than using voiceover, they just cut to whatever he's telling them. And like you just see it, but you see it from this very like restricted view. It's like very subjective, and none of the scenes really are shot wide. They're all kind of like medium close-ups. So you feel it's like a hyper realistic, not hyper realistic, but like there's a heightened sense of reality because you're in this subjective space with the main character, and there's you're fixated on specific points. Like you wouldn't necessarily need plenty of other supporting characters because there'd be whole sequences where like, I don't know, maybe she's recounting a story about checking at a hotel and having like a weird thing with the clerk or something. You wouldn't need to cast the clerk or give the clerk dialogue. You would just shoot that scene showing like the discomfort she has in that interaction. You might only need to see the guy's hands, or something like that. But that's kind of how I picture it, where it's like a lot of this stuff is her and this doctor in a room and everything else is just like glimpses, like pieces of dreams. You know what I mean? Just like very kind of like fleeting imagery and stuff where you don't have to cut away to like really belabored drama stuff,
Yeah, I like the idea of a mix where like I think there's a certain claustrophobia by making the structure all within these sessions, but I think we need to see her stalking, right? I think that is like the under the skin of it all. That's the girl walks home alone at night of it all, where like we need to see her as predator, of her giving into her urges, giving into these impulses she can't control. And that's going to be what takes us along for the ride of, again, making that very subjective, whether it's POV like that Elijah Wood Maniac remake, or just like very, sort of closely shot and everything. But we have to feel like we're sort of drawn along with her as she's sort of unable to stop herself. And that's where a lot of the horror comes in. We really, I think, can draw out some of these sequences of like her following someone. I'm just thinking of Under the Skin now, but, to a bar and then taking him home and then, and then the kill. And we can frame it within she's recounting this to the psychiatrist or whatever, but we see it happen from her perspective and we're sort of trapped along with her. Right. And another idea I just had, because as we were talking about with the original Dracula's Daughter, there's sort of a friction in the basic premise of the film, which is how is a psychiatrist going to help her from vampirism, right? And I think Dylan in Dracula Lives, you sort of establish this link between witches and magic and Dracula, right? And you sort of establish this theory of magic for the dark universe about it being very, very kind of holistic and tied to the person using it and everything. And I think maybe this person is not just a psychiatrist. He's some kind of warlock or something, that she goes to because she knows this is a magical object she's bound to. And she thinks she's just going to come and be like, hey, can you just undo the spell and get rid of it? He's like, no, it's so much more complicated than that. We have to this is about freeing you from its spell. I can't cancel the spell. I need to help guide you out of it. And so it does turn into these kind of psychiatry sessions where it's like, I need to know more about you. I need to know what you're feeling as you hunt these people. I need to experience that through your eyes. And then maybe as things start unraveling and she's seeing the psychiatrist, the warlock as Dracula, and she's tying them together because now this person's taking advantage of her just like Dracula did and he gave her the ring. What if we find out that this warlock is the person who enchanted the fucking ring in the first place? That the reason she can't get rid of it is because it's his magic. He could have undone it at any time. Right. But she's been in his web from the beginning. And honestly, from the beginning with Dracula, because it was his magic. He's, close to Dracula. Maybe she knows of him because of Dracula, and it turns out she's fallen back into the same old trap,
And that also comes with the idea where, like you said, he could break the spell anytime that he wants, but what he's getting out of this is the vicarious thrill of getting to get to live out her like lurid sexual like vampire tales
and just the fun of manipulating her.
Yeah, I almost think even some of the sequences we're going to see that are like her recounting her stalking kills and stuff, and like what we're seeing, maybe it's not actually what it's like for her. Maybe what we're seeing is like what he's manipulating out of her, like what he interprets these interactions to be like, because that's the part he's into. I especially like the idea of him being like a warlock, like Dracula hanger-on guy. You know what I mean? Like who essentially is like, maybe he's spent a very long time wanting to be with one of Dracula's girls, and it's like, Dracula's finally dead. Like, like he's just been like waiting, and he's just been like waiting for his turn now. I feel like there's a lot of room to like, obviously this is like a supernatural horror story, but I feel like there's a lot of room to like really imbue these figures with some of the like just inherent sleaziness of like what like real world monsters are like. You know what I mean? Like, and tethering that to some things that we know to be grotesque about like manipulative magic and bloodsucking and all that stuff, but like tying it to like actual real life manipulation, real life, just like creepster fucks.
Yeah, I think we should like this warlock at first, right? He needs to be that like that kind of abuser that, manipulates you from the beginning where, I think we should root for him. Maybe we even I think we should like him, and then it slowly comes out as we go, like how truly disgusting and manipulative and abusive and awful he is. But it's not apparent to us or her from the beginning that that's the case, you know, as it is with a lot of like truly evil men, you know, in the world.
Yeah, I feel like there'll be stuff early on where he's pushing her to relive stuff that's like obviously difficult for her, but like it's presented as being like lyrical and like kind of hot or whatever. And then maybe the first time it happens, we don't notice her mind because like on some level the viewer is also just, they like looking at things. We like certain types of imagery, regardless if it's like thematic content or whatever. But then you could like, as the story progresses and we start to trust this guy less, have a moment where we, the viewer, want nothing more than like take a breather and pull back from this.
Yeah.
And he's like, no. We'll keep going. What happened after that? And like, you really start to be like, oh, you're fucked up. Like, this is not good.
Now
this is the last person she should have come to.
Now I'm kind of getting an image of this being, if we wanted to, along the lines of the new French extremity movement, where he's obsessed with, he has a sort of psychosexual obsession with the violence of these kills. And so at first, when we're first recounting these kills, it's like a standard horror movie kill. You know, she's like sucking the blood and everything, and it's shocking, and we're getting what we want as the audience, right? We're getting a gnarly kill. We're getting blood and guts and a vampire movie. But as it goes, like he dwells on the kills, right? To a degree that should be uncomfortable to us, the audience, because it's uncomfortable to her and it's now uncomfortable to us because, ooh, this is actually more violence for longer. Like we can go into torture porn territory because it's not torture porn for violence sake. It's violence for the sake of making the viewer uncomfortable because we're now through this psychopath's eyes, right? Which is sort of the thing about New French Extremity, which is like, yeah, you're supposed to feel bad about this stuff, you know? And so that could be one direction that we could take it in. I'm not saying we should, but like that way we're always in Dracula's daughter's shoes as we're both getting pulled along by this man's sort of sick obsessions, right?
Yeah.
I dig it. If we want to go one step further, we could step out of it and have the warlock try to reproduce one of her kills at some point, and that would be like kind of raise the narrative stakes, and that we know it's a foregone conclusion how all these encounters are going to end with Dracula's daughter, and so we're getting his fantasy of what that looks like. But those people are long dead, right? A way to create an extra level of jeopardy later in the movie could be that he's no longer satisfied with reliving her memories. He wants to create one. And so either he goes out and does this himself or tries to get her to do it again.
I think it's that one. I think that's actually our climax,
the
right?
Second one, yeah.
I think what we do is he's like, you know, we haven't made much progress. I need to be with you on one of these. And he goes with her, and meanwhile, she's conflating it in her mind with Dracula taking her on her first kill.
I love it.
Right? Like Dracula being like, this is what you do now. And so she's flashing between the current victim and the warlock and her first victim and Dracula. And it's in this context, it's our first time leaving in the sort of structure of the film, leaving the warlock's office. That's not in a flashback or a memory or a retelling of a story. This is actually happening in our climax of the movie. We leave and it's in this person's home or wherever the killing happens that the sort of final confrontation takes place. And she realizes that he has been the one manipulating her. He's the one that, you know, enchanted the ring, and she kills him. Maybe after killing the victim as well. She kills the victim, sees what's going on, then kills him, and that's what frees her from the ring. If we wanted a kind of happy ending for Dracula's daughter, right? She kills him, the ring is depowered, or she's freed from it, or whatever.
Yeah, I think that all works.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it kind of boils down to like how we end up wanting to depict her condition as being, you know, like when you watch Dracula's daughter, the more she talks about not wanting to be a vampire, but you know that it's kind of coded to being, you know, lesbian. The idea of like being rid of it seems grotesque, right?
Right, true.
So like on some level in this story, if there are like uncomfortable elements of her sexual being that are all tethered to like stuff that Dracula or this warlock put into her, it would really just be a matter of stripping those things away. But then it's also like, I don't know what the fair way to end a movie where it's like, you're still a vampire, but you're like a good, we don't turn like into a daywalker or something, right?
Here's what we do. So once she kills him, she's able to take the ring off, and we see her throw it away, right? And in the sort of final moments of the film, we see her out, maybe in a similar context as she's been before when she's been on the hunt, a bar where she's like finding a man to kill or something, and she sort of catches someone's eye, and we're like, oh, is she now going to have like a normal relationship with someone, whether it's a woman, whether it's a man, whatever we want to do with it. But like, oh, we've seen her do this before with the intention of killing, but now she's sort of seeing someone now that she's free. But in the last moments of the film, after they sort of make eyes and she starts to walk over to him, she pulls the ring out of her pocket and puts it back on. The idea being that she's free of the ring, but that means she can wear it as she wants to. It's not under someone else's control. Now she's under control of the ring. And that's sort of like when we cut to black.
Yeah, and that kind of makes it sort of a dark ending, meaning that this whole experience where she has been trying to free herself has been kind of futile, because at the end, there's something that she has to accept that the warlock was right about her, and that she actually can't give this up because the kind of power that it gives her, which allows her to remain dangerous, right, and potentially useful if we decide to integrate her into future stories. And is honestly just a better horror movie ending. Like the idea that like you can commit yourself to trying to escape whatever your dark impulses are, but you actually can't just switch them off or throw them away. They're always going to be a part of you, and you have to either choose to fight them or to allow them to rule you. And in this case, she is, like a functioning alcoholic for blood.
Yeah.
I think it's fair. And it's fair in that, like, this isn't, in theory, if she becomes a canon character, this isn't the end of the road for her. So like, there's still, you leave mileage for the character to continue going on without cheating people, without being like, oh, there is no arc because there's 4 sequels, like, it's not like that. It's just a matter of, this is where we're leaving her now. And, I don't know, it feels satisfying. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it feels satisfying and a little icky. Like, there's so much ickiness in the story that the ending has to have like a little bit of icky.
And the thing is, we could make it like the clean sort of like quote unquote feminist ending of a movie like Teeth or something, where she targets like maybe a man who has just been like yelling at a girl at the bar or something, right? She's now targeting men like Dracula or men like the Warlock, where she sees this guy screaming at some girl, the girl storms off, and then she goes to go after him, and it's like, oh, okay, so now she's like using the power to, kill men like this.
Right, and we haven't actually added an entry into the good for her canon so far in the Dark Universe.
This would be our good for her movie, yeah. But like, if we want to keep it ickier, it could just be like, no, she just still likes, the killing part of it, and sometimes likes to put the ring back on.
Yeah, I think we'll have to be careful to avoid, like, we're dealing with the whole sticky sexuality of it and trying not to condemn, like, being a lesbian.
It would 100% depend on how we depicted the homosexual undertones of the movie, which would absolutely depend on like the nitty gritty of the script and stuff, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I know that in Dracula Lives, I had to make sure to take efforts to paint the nature of Dracula's sexuality as something kind of entirely separate from the nature of his sexual predation. Or I should say, separate his sexual orientation from his sexual predation.
This is something Al Sharpton would say. I don't know why. It sounds like a real Al Sharpton cadence.
Yeah, you know what? People are telling me all the time that I sound just like Al Sharpton.
Yeah, Dylan, why don't you give us your Al Sharpton impression on air? I think we all want to hear your Al Sharpton impression.
So
I think something that I was really not moved by when I was thinking about the dynamic here is like, this is very unrelated to Dracula's daughter. I wrote a piece about the movie The Watermelon Woman last week. This like early 90s indie movie directed by a black lesbian. And in the movie, she has a relationship with a white woman played by Guinevere Turner. And Guinevere Turner was sort of an early 90s like Sundance set, like queer movie mainstay person, but she's said to have in real life inspired the movie Chasing Amy. And there's there's been like I don't know how true, I don't know if this is canon or not, but like that like Kevin Smith and his producer Scott Mosier, I think both like developed some kind of weird love triangle with her in real life that helped inform parts of Chasing Amy. But the parts in the movie that, whether that's true or not, always stuck with me is like so much of that movie is about watching Ben Affleck like look at another woman's sexuality from this completely like removed perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And he only thinks about it and how it affects him or what he feels about it as if it has anything to do with him, you know?
Yeah.
And so much of that movie is that character having to like grow up and just like realize other people's past and their identities have like nothing to do with you. And it made me think about how often men do prey on queer women in particular. Like there's so much of the complexity of who they are is like plucked apart as just being like, this is hot. I don't find that part hot though. This is hot. That's not hot. You know? And I realized like if you have that kind of character and she's wrestling with this stuff, and you don't want it to just seem like we're conflating vampirism with lesbianism, which is weird. If you make it much more that like, no, this is sort of a metaphor for like the vastness of her identity and like who she is and what she's drawn to and what she likes and doesn't like. And then she's surrounded between these two like lurid characters who don't see her as a real person, just as like someone to pluck this stuff from, someone to just suck this energy out of. Do you know what I mean? So like, I feel like that's a really cool way to explore that. And then sure, if it ends with her like putting a ring on, like killing one of those guys, we're like, yeah, that's cool. Still kind of creepy, but I get it. I feel you, girl.
I love that. In any case, I think it's time for us to talk about casting.
Yes, we have to cast these two roles. Obviously, we'll get Mads Mikkelsen to make an appearance. He'll have a pretty big role in this.
Yes, I have people in mind. Dom, did you come with anybody locked and loaded for these parts?
No, really, I didn't actually. So I'd love to hear you guys think.
All right. For Maria, I imagine we'll keep the name, the titular Dracula's daughter.
Okay.
I had a couple ideas that were rolling around in my head, and then once we started thinking of this as a potential like awards vehicle, the idea that we want somebody who would be a great fit for this role, and also her presence there automatically puts it on various Oscar shortlists because that's how the Oscars work. Lazy as it sounds, I think Kristen Stewart is the right person for this role.
I can see that. I
think it would be an avenue for her to return to horror and vampire horror on terms
vampire horror.
In terms that fits her current career trajectory
as a modern gay icon.
Yes. Also, the internet would go absolutely apeshit. Everyone would want to go see that movie and that whole segment of like film Twitter. I think that she'd crush it because she's, I think, very good at playing roles that are internal via being external, I guess. I'm thinking about Spencer, right? Like a character who is struggling so much with like her own personality and like what it means to her and like trying to be a person in an environment where no one wants her to be a person. They want her to be a particular idea of a person. This would be a completely different take on that idea, but I believe that it's something that she has in her toolbox. I think she can also be kind of menacing.
I do like that. I was kind of thinking, I've been thinking a lot about the diversity of our cast in the Dark Universe, and this is a very prominent female role, maybe one of our first female-led, maybe our first like totally female-led.
The real lead of Jekyll X Hyde is Gabrielle, played by Zoe Kravitz. And the first Bill character in The Wolfman is Gwen,
but it's also that's a two-hander.
That's two-hander, sure.
And Gabby is sharing with Jekyll, although this is, I guess, with Dracula.
We have not yet had a woman as the title character in a movie who was also the main character, because even our Phantom, she's not the main character. I mean, those are a bunch of that movie is all women. But it's also all white women.
But yeah, that's the thing is I was wondering, should we get a black woman in this role? Because I think that also maybe heightens the stakes of having two white men preying on her, both.
Right, because if we're going to play physical resemblance with Mads Mikkelsen, then we would probably go for a white actor with
we would go with a white actor for the Warlock.
So. Yeah, I have a name for that as well.
Who do we have for the Warlock?
Glenn Powell. Glenn Powell is known really well as the cocky wingman from Top Gun now. I think that he's first of all, I think he has a very similar head shape to Mads Mikkelsen.
Yes.
But we're looking for somebody who is very charismatic and can play and can play like the good guy, but also if he smiles the right way, looks like he's gonna give you like fucking heat ray vision. I think he's like a really good smiling villain, like because he has that good old boy thing going for him. I think he'd be really great for this.
I like this because it feels like casting Jonathan Groff as Mr. Smith in the fourth Matrix movie. Like that feels like very kind of equivalent casting to me.
Well, let's circle back around.
Actually,
I do like that.
Dom, what do you think of Glenn Powell for this role?
My only thing with Glenn Powell is that I picture he's so like, I think he could do the early parts of just seeming like a good guy. But I worry that once he becomes more menacing, he actually becomes like there's like a waspiness to him that I don't picture this character having. Like I picture them being slightly more ethnic, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I don't know how to say it. Like,
oh no, like spicy white, if you will. We're looking for a Dylan Roth type.
I picture like a more spicy white actor because I think of like Mads Mikkelsen as being like he's a white guy, but he's also like. He looks like he came out of like a fucked up painting, you know? Like that's I don't remember where he's really from. He might, be from wherever the Vigo painting from Ghostbusters 2 is from.
I think he's Danish.
Yeah. But I picture one person I thought of briefly, but then I realized I was thinking of him because he plays a similar part in another movie, but I couldn't remember what movie it was, is Edgar Ramirez. There's some movie I watched where he's a therapist, but he like becomes like romantically entangled with the woman he's interviewing. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think it's The Girl on the Train.
I have not seen this, so
it's a movie with what's her name? Emily Blunt is like an alcoholic, and it's like an airport novel, murder mystery, Gone Girl adjacent. But I just like Edgar Ramirez a lot. I always thought he would be a cool Dracula.
What about?
But that might be a bit on the nose.
I do not know his ethnicity, so I might be stupid here, if it matters. But what about like Rami Malek?
Rami Malek
my only view of the Rami Malek is I just don't take him seriously in anything anymore.
Yeah, he's too big for this.
He's here.
Well, he'd be
too
up with
big.
Mads Mikkelsen,
I mean big in terms of the size of his performance. I don't mean big in terms of his name. I'm not a huge fan of Rami Malek.
That's fair. Okay.
I also
this is not an actual idea, but when you said Glenn Powell, what I heard was Glenn Howerton.
Oh, wow.
Like, okay.
Wait, hang on.
That's where you want to go, I guess.
He's really good in Blackberry. And that's a transformative role, unrecognizable in that movie, and he's really good in it.
I find myself wishing we could cast like 1995 Billy Zane.
Oh, that would be great. Who is the modern equivalent of Billy Zane? Do we have one?
Do we have a Billy Zane right now?
I don't think we have one. We don't have a guy who's that sexy, but also that like weird.
Well, okay, so
Billy Zane's a little bit weird.
Here's somebody you could go for in that, though, would be like a Mark Ruffalo. He's a little older than I imagined, but like he can be gentle and he can be intense. He has he doesn't have that sort of waspy look to him. And he's probably around the same age as Mads, but I was thinking of somebody who would appear a little bit closer to our Dracula's daughter's age. But that doesn't have to be the case.
What about a Stanley Tucci?
Ooh, does our universe need a little touch of the Tucci?
Do we need a Tucci?
I mean, I fucking love Stanley Tucci. He's one of my favorite actors.
Wait. Is this where we get Brad Dourif in the Dark Universe?
Ooh, it's so hard to say because, like, we've been saving Brad Dourif. But my problem is I don't know that at any point you would buy Brad Dourif as not the villain of the movie. That's the problem. I fucking love the guy, but I don't think if we're trying to play the villain as a twist, he's too obviously the bad guy.
We need somebody friendly, especially as he's older now.
Like this guy has the same thing as the Glenn Powell problem. But I was like, my first thought was, it was like, I'm looking for somebody who can do what Topher Grace does in Predators. Where you think he's the harmless, hapless nerd type, and it turns out he's the sickest guy in the whole movie.
Everyone listening to this is screaming at their phones right now with their own ideas. We're going to get so many responses like, why didn't you cast this actor?
Dom, you have one. Throw it at us.
Well, when you said Predators, I thought Adrian Brody.
Adrian Brody would be very good.
He can be so soft and kind of like caring and stuff, but also like something about him, he has that like he's tall, he's kind of gaunt.
Yeah,
also looks kind of menacing.
He does great villains.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Adrian Brody could be a great pick.
That could be really good.
And his head kind of is like a little, like a vertically squashed Mads Mikkelsen. And he's from Queens, baby.
Is Adrian Brody our best pick?
Well, let's work backwards from our lead then. Let's earmark that. Who do we want to play Dracula's daughter then? Who I think we should probably start calling by her name. Who is going to play Maria? I've lost her last name as a character.
Yeah, my head is kind of calling her the Countess because I think that sounds badass.
Right.
Yeah.
Who do we want to play?
She would have to have a person name.
Yes. Who do we want to play the Countess Maria Zaleska?
It's in the realm of like Under the Skin if we only ever referred to her as the Countess. Right? And like never actually learned her real name through the whole movie. She was just referred to as the Countess.
Yeah, the way the dialogue and stuff would be written, I don't know if they would ever call her by her name. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's just one-on-one conversations.
My argument against that is that if she's our viewpoint character and we're trying to stay attached to her and we're trying to it depends on whether or not we as the filmmakers want to look at her as this dehumanized figure the way that the Warlock does, or if we want to be in her perspective and experience the dehumanization with her.
Well, I don't think it's about dehumanizing her. It's about allowing the audience to step into her shoes, right? It's allowing the audience to be one with the protagonist, right? Which I think is easier to do when you're not giving them a name. Like dehumanizing for the sake of creating a closer empathetic relationship between character and audience.
So your intent with that would be opening it up like the way that like a classic novel might use, like this character's name is D blank.
Sure.
Or
even being in the first person, right?
Right. See, there we go. I think that's probably more like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because my worry about not giving her a name is the way that it potentially separates would be a way to separate her from personhood, right? If a character doesn't have a name, it does sometimes minimize them. Not always, right? Of course, there's the 21st century's greatest action hero protagonist from the movie Tenet.
I was also thinking of that, yeah.
Never not thinking about Tenet.
Yeah, it's playing at the Alamo Draft House next month.
Wait, really? Because I still haven't seen it.
Yo, let's go.
Let's go see Tenet.
Let's fucking go.
Theaters.
If anybody wants to go see Tenet when it plays in July at Alamo Draft House, Brooklyn, hit us up because we're gonna fucking go.
There we go.
Unless my kid has something.
All right, we're 90 minutes in. We got a cast.
All right, we need a countess. Now we're talking about not having it be a white woman, which still opens it up quite a bit for quite a number of actors. We haven't established an age range really for the actor who has the energy we're looking for, who can be regal but vulnerable, and can play as somebody who is a threat but is trying to escape being the danger that is herself.
This is where I wish we hadn't already used Thandie
Newton. She would be great.
She would actually be perfect.
I kind of would like to aim. I would like to aim younger.
Yeah, we could probably aim younger.
Yeah, I picture the part being younger, just because I kind of like the idea of there are so many things that are like unique to the experience of like a woman in her like mid 20s to early 30s. And I feel like a lot of women like long to get out of that zone, out of that demographic, and to mature and stuff. And I feel like the idea of being trapped in like your quote unquote like Hollywood prime for like 100 years and always being preyed upon by men in the exact same way feels like a unique kind of curse. Like it's not quite as obvious as like, you know, being like 13-year-old Kirsten Dunst vampire and like you're always a kid, like that sucks. But the idea that you were always like prom queen age or whatever, and you were always going to just be like badgered is like, I was thinking of, I honestly actually really strongly, you know, I think Kristen Stewart would be fantastic. But if we are trying to diversify a little more, I've only seen her in like 2 or 3 things, but I really like Kiersey Clemons, who is Iris West in The Flash.
She's in Dope.
She had like a small part in what the fuck is that movie? There's this movie I watched that I hated that she's in, but she was like good in it. It was the thing with Janelle Monáe, Antebellum. This really movie.
I remember your absolutely fucking acerbic review of Antebellum.
It's so bad.
Go ahead and check out Dom's review of Antebellum on YouTube. If you just search Armchair Auteur Antebellum and just get fucking lit up.
Okay, but on the subject of
Everyone hated
Antebellum, I don't know that this is a good fit, but I kind of think Janelle Monáe would be an interesting person to consider for this as well.
Well, if we're talking about somebody, I mean, she's a fine actress and she can absolutely open a movie, but the conversation we were having, especially about youth, was making me think of who is a very famous, very talented, sought after, and lyrically exploited black actress of our time.
Ice Spice. You're thinking Ice Spice.
Zendaya is who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I thought about Zendaya, but then I was like, man, there's this thing that happens when it comes to like trying to do diverse casting, which is that whatever ethnicity, male and female, you're talking about, there's like a 1 and 2 for every one of them.
Yeah.
So it's like it's like, oh, let's get Idris Elba. He's too old. Let's get Damson Idris. It's like, oh yeah,
I know it. I know it's kind of the easy answer, but it is the kind of thing where if we're trying to pick somebody in their mid-20s,
that's so easy and it's so obvious.
So we might want to avoid it.
Well, because I was trying to think of it's not just the idea that we're trying to get like a different ethnicity. It's also like, all right, who else is quite the incendiary like queer icon that like Kristen Stewart is on film Twitter in other races? And Zendaya doesn't have quite the same like footprint, obviously. Like she works in a very different space and stuff. But I do feel like she's similarly unassailable, where like if you put her in the role, even though she is an actress and she will do work, she won't even really have to do that much work for the audience to kind of already just be like on her side, to already kind of want to follow her on whatever journey she goes on. I do think it would be a little bit weird if it was Zendaya and we had to watch her just get ping pong between Mads Mikkelsen and Adrian Brody for a whole movie.
Sure, but we want it to be uncomfortable, right?
Age.
Sure.
Yeah.
But although I thought that was kind of part of what we were deliberately going for.
But that's kind of why I think Janelle Monáe is an interesting pick, because she is a beauty icon, but an adult, and would be
like more firmly an adult, yeah.
More firmly an adult, and has this sort of regal beauty that, like, you can see Dracula, like, being like, "You are my bride."
Oh,
you know,
of course.
like,
listen, anybody who cannot appreciate Janelle Monáe as just like this, like one of the most gorgeous people on the planet, I kind of. And I don't know what your deal is.
It feels like the point
this
she's
person
at
I just made up who probably doesn't exist.
The point she's at in her career feels like the time where she does a movie that's all about her killing people. Like that is like that's not far of a leap from The Age of Pleasure to like, okay, now here's the movie where like I kill men. You know, like but I've never seen her do something like this, and it's a little hard to picture even, but I also see her having that sort of like empty-eyed predator thing that like Scarlett Johansson had in Under the Skin, right? Where it's like this person is like otherworldly right now, and we could even like have her play it like a little devoid of personality, because she is all just hunger and desire that we as the audience are meant to step into. So it doesn't have to be a big performance. It can be a very sort of blank performance, and that's the purpose of it. And I can see Janelle embodying that really well, almost like she's like walking through a music video, you know. But I don't know.
I mean, I had imagined we were talking about a younger actor. She's 37. Granted, she looks better than any of us looked when we were 25. So I think she's got chops. I think she's good.
Yeah.
I'm also absolutely certain that she could sell the fuck out of this movie if that's a factor.
Does Janelle Monáe use she, they, or they, them pronouns?
I think she uses she. Pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure they're non-binary, but I don't know if it's
I think
all
that
they,
she's,
them, or
I think
they.
that she's non-binary, but goes by she, her. I know she's non-binary, but I believe she goes by she, her.
Just going to Google it just in case. This is not the podcast for us to be misgendering people.
Monáe identified herself as non-binary and added that her pronouns are free ass motherfucker and they, them, her, she. So you can do whatever you want.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Free for all.
I remembered that she commented on this at some point.
I think it would be fascinating to see. Janelle's only been in a few movies, but like there's like a binary of what Janelle does on screen, and it's like you either have the kind of like quiet, understated, but very charming work from like Moonlight or like Hidden Figures, and then you've got like, I know a lot of people love her performance in Glass Onion, but it is so much. I mean, a lot of people in that movie are doing a lot, so like I get it, but like it would be cool to see if she could bring it down to this kind of like smoldering place. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I feel like there are going to be parts where, like you said, like she would be like this kind of like vacant, kind of like hollowed out, haunted figure. But then I think as she actually, like, you know, we get more of her story and like we see what's really going on to her, it would need to pivot a little bit more into like a more classical femme fatale direction.
Yeah.
And I think she's a talented enough artist at everything that she does that it would be fun to let her loose on that. It's just essentially like, look, you take this, you see where this goes. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what happens. I like her for it.
Yeah, you know what? I'm enthusiastic about the idea of adding her to our cast, to our ensemble, like in the long term.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I also think it would be rad if she wrote a song for it.
Oh yeah.
I was also thinking that like
none of the other people that we've considered, could do that.
No, we're gonna have her write an entire concept album about it. Actually,
yeah, okay.
I'm gonna get Janelle Monáe back on her concept album bag. I don't want the pop albums anymore, Janelle. You owe us 2 more acts of the Electric Lady saga.
All right, well, listen, we're not going to spend a lot of money on making the movie, so we're going to put all that money into producing and promoting the album,
the visual album.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. There we go.
She would kill a visual album based on this movie. They would knock it all like misty, haunted, like fuck The Weeknd. Like Janelle Monáe is going to do the ultimate horror visual album, and it's going to be because of this movie.
I would imagine, obviously, Janelle Monáe can come up with her own fucking ideas for a visual album, but like the idea of the album being the life of this character throughout time, and each one of the songs is like a different period where she's going on like a hunt or an adventure or like a weird guilt trip, and then that could all also be canon in the universe.
Now, Dom, when you came on to pitch this, did you know that it would end with Janelle Monáe contributing a new concept visual album to the Dark Universe?
Now, no, but I did know that I could trust you both to take this germ and knock it out of the park. So that definitely exceeded my expectations on this.
I think we're about ready to get into Picture Lock. Dom, is there anything you want to add? Also, I will defer to you for final casting. Are you, who are our final people we're locking in here?
I think we should lock in Janelle Monáe for all the obvious reasons.
Okay.
I love that we can bring Mads back into this.
Mm-hmm.
Mads being Dracula is just like the coolest thing ever. Since he's never going to get to be Dr. Doom, this is, I guess, the closest I can see him being Slavic with a cape. And then I mean, if you guys are on board, I think Adrian Brody would be really good.
Let's do
the Warlock Professor guy. Something about him, I feel like he would really sink his teeth into this one, literally.
Great. I think we can make this canon.
Yeah, let's do it.
It actually fits in pretty well. And again, this is another non-core entry where I think we have developed a character that we can absolutely use in the Dark Legion going forward.
Yeah, now that we've broken the seal on that, we don't have to be coy and be like, hey, Dom, if we have your blessing, we would love to bring the Countess into future installments.
I'm sorry, but by pitching this to us, we do own everything that you just pitched. Yeah, this is now the property of Universal Studios. And also, we've been training an AI model on your voice, so we're going to do more episodes with you, but without actually you on the guest. We're just going to use computers to make you say anything we want. So.
Oh, and which is why that no matter how you answer this question, it doesn't really matter. But are you, we'll put you under the gun right now. Would you be interested in reprising the role of Victor Frankenstein in the Dark Legion too?
Of course, yeah. I figured I'd sign on for like some kind of fucked up 10-picture deal. So
yes, yeah, that is true.
All right.
We have it in blood.
All right, Dalton, fucking press the button.
It's alive! In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God.
Wow, we are on a roll with these guest pitches.
Yeah, it's popping off here in the Dark Universe.
Dom, thank you so much for this excellent pitch. I think this is a really great addition to the canon. Before we wrap up, is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm a film critic. My primary homes as a critic right now are I freelance at looper.com. I'm also the resident film critic for the Baltimore Beat. It's a local alt weekly. And my home base is my YouTube channel, The Armchair Tour. I've had a really rough year last year of not uploading very much, but we're kind of back on schedule and doing more consistent stuff. So I have some stuff coming up that I'm pretty excited about. Yeah, so check me out there.
Hell yeah.
Great. Dom, thank you so much for joining us. I actually think if you want to stick around for the mailbag, you might have something to say about that. We have one mailbag question because we answered so much during the Dracula Lives episode.
Right.
We only have one thing. We have an anonymous email. I'll just read the text. Big names like Giancarlo Esposito, Dan Stevens, and horror superstar directors Radio Silence are attached to a monster thriller at Universal. We all know that new ideas have been outlawed. So, do the Dark Universe masterminds have any gut feelings about what they might be rebooting? I mean, I do.
It's got to be Wolfman, right?
They're going to make him Wolfman.
It's got to be the Wolfman.
Let's look at the people who are attached to this fucking movie.
If Dan Stevens is the Wolfman, that's pretty fun casting.
That would be
that's
so
really
good. I'm like frustrated that I didn't think of that. Now, granted, I did have Radio Silence do our Wolfman.
Yes.
But let's look at who's attached to Untitled Monster Thriller for Universal Pictures Project 2024. Cast: Catherine Newton, Melissa Barrera from the Scream movies, Dan Stevens, and like that's the lead cast, right? The writer attached to this is Guy Busiek and Stephen Shields, who have previously worked on Ready or Not and Scream with the Radio Silence.
Yeah,
boys.
this is a Wolfman.
But if we're going based on the cast, like the idea of having Dan Stevens as the Wolfman is very appealing.
It's got to be the Wolfman. Just looking at it.
Yeah.
And also
which would be
because
fucking cool, probably really great press for our show.
Guillermo del Toro's doing a Frankenstein,
so that's out, and Chloe Zhao is doing a Dracula right now for Universal.
Dracula,
well, and they just had Renfield, and they're having the one about the boat. And,
there's too many Draculas.
A lot of Dracula
not going to be one of those.
Going around.
It's Wolfman time, baby.
The only other one it could be would be like Creature from the Black Lagoon, but that doesn't feel like a cast for a creature. And it fucking better not be a Black Lagoon movie because I'm writing my Black Lagoon screenplay right now, and I'm working really hard on it, and I want to sell it.
Here's
so no
the
one
argument
else sell
for
a Black Lagoon movie.
Here's the argument for necessarily being Black. Well, no, because Dan Stevens is a guy who you don't just do mocap, but he has done that. He was the Beast in the Beast.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
So the idea of him being like a totally only exclusively digital character is not completely unheard of, but he's way more likely to be playing Larry Talbot.
Oh yeah,
and that's exciting. The idea of getting to see what they would actually do with a Wolfman movie versus what we'll call my early work on this show. Do you have any other guesses?
Your work was better than the Benicio del Toro movie.
Well, okay. I actually pointedly did not watch the Benicio del Toro movie, even though
a good call.
I hear that was a big mess, and I right now have too much respect for Joe Johnston, and I don't want that to be ruined for me.
I think that's what it's got to be. No other guesses from me.
All right. Thank you to weirdly unsigned email that we have to that has brought this to our attention because that had not been super on our radar, and it's so extremely on our wheelhouse. So other than that, I mean, the next time you hear from us, it's going to be the recap episode.
Yes, our next episode, we will be recapping the entire saga so far, not including Dracula's daughter, because we did tape it before this episode, but everything up through Dracula Lives, and so that you can catch up for the Dark Legion 2, which will then be coming 4 weeks from today. In the meantime, you can find us on all social media at Dark Universe Pod or email us at darkuniversepod@gmail.com. We realized the other day, I don't think we've ever mentioned that we have a merch store where you can buy Dark Universe Podcast merch. We've had it for like months and months. You can buy t-shirts and coffee mugs and tons of shit. What's the website?
That's darkuniversepod.threadless.com. We have two designs. We have our full color logo and our sort of cool black and white version, both provided to us by our friend Kate, who was the voice of Rita in House of Dracula.
That's right.
Great work on those. And so you can get them on a variety of stuff. We cannot yet have them embroidered on a hat, Kevin Feige style. We're still working on that. Though. We really want to have that. But if you want it on a mug or a shirt or a skateboard, those options are available.
If you get the Dark Universe skateboard, how much is the Dark Universe skateboard?
I think it's like $100.
If you get the Dark Universe skateboard...
That's with just the deck and you don't get any of the hardware.
We will give you a free Patreon subscription. I will make that pledge to you. And speaking of the Patreon, please subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/Dylan and Dalton, all spelled out, because we are how many people away from meeting our goal of a bonus podcast? Bonus?
We're roughly like 15 patrons away, I think.
15 patrons away, and you will get a bonus podcast where we talk about all kinds of cool stuff. You can get our takes on the Titan sub implosion. We'll do a whole episode. No, honestly, it'll mostly be tangentially related to this podcast.
Right. We'll talk about new and classic horror movies that are not Universal projects, but also some that are. Like, we keep saying we will watch and talk about The Pope's Exorcist starring our boy,
that's right,
Russell Crowe. We've talked about maybe watching the MTV Scream series that neither of us has watched and talking about that, or Ash versus the Evil Dead, which neither of us have seen.
Wait, what? There was a movie we just talked about last episode that neither of us had seen. I'll cut it. I don't remember.
Hotel Transylvania.
We'll watch the Hotel Transylvania series. Yes,
all that type of
for
stuff.
all of you, and maybe work on some more pitches for non-Universal stuff.
But in the meantime, also, if you just like hearing us talk about movies, we do bi-weekly watch parties of films that we can't advertise or confirm, and we do those on the Discord as well. And we have a really nice crew that hangs out in the chat while we do our goofy little commentary. And I don't know, there's lots of fun happening there. Really nice crew there on the Discord. You should join us, have some fun.
So thank you to our guest Dominic Griffin for pitching Dracula's Daughter and adding it to our Dark Universe canon. And until next time,
Stay afraid of the Dark Universe.